Xtalks is the industry leader in connecting life science, food, healthcare, and medical device professionals. The Xtalks Life Science podcast features insightful conversations with industry experts about all things pharma, biotech, and more.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. I'm Ayesha Rashid, Senior Life Science Journalist at Xtalks.com. And this week, I'm so happy to introduce a very special guest on the show. We have with us today Brent Lucas, who is the CEO of Envoy Medical, a medical device company focused on providing innovative technologies across the hearing loss spectrum. Brent has been the CEO of Envoy Medical for the last 7 years, and he's a lawyer by training with a legal background. And as a medical devices executive, he has extensive experience leading across enterprise functions. And specifically, he has over 15 years of experience in active implantables in the hearing health industry. Brent has a bachelor's degree from the University of St. Thomas and JD from the Mitchell Hamline School of Law. And so in speaking about our topic today, hearing health and the hearing loss industry, according to the National Institute of Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, 13% of people in the U.S. 12 years of age and older have hearing loss in both ears. And so that really highlights the importance of solutions to help this population. So to hear more about Envoy Medical's hearing solutions and more about hearing health, including guidance on how to protect hearing, where the industry may be headed in the next few years, as well as the Hearing Device Coverage Clarification Act and where it currently stands, let's turn to Brent now. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us.
Brent, I'd like to start off by asking you about your background and journey to Envoy Medical. As I mentioned, you are a lawyer by training, so I'm very interested to know how you went from that into the medical devices industry and into medical device leadership as the CEO of Envoy Medical.
Yeah, unfortunately, I am a lawyer. I apologize for that in advance. So my journey to this position is quite a long journey and tied to my father, who was one of the first investors in what was then called St. Croix Medical back in 1995. So I was in middle school, going into high school, when he first wrote a check to invest in a company called St. Croix Medical. That company, St. Croix Medical, was built around the idea of using the ear to pick up sound. So they did not have a device made yet. It was the proverbial back of a napkin. The idea came from somebody in the hearing space who said, microphones have limitations, speakers have limitations. Why don't we actually use the ear to pick up sound like the human brain was designed to get the information? And that was when it was found. So that's how far back the story goes for me personally. While I was in law school, I started to intern at the company. So I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer. I was using a JD sort of as an MBA, if you will. It was my way of getting an advanced degree and furthering my education to become more of an attractive candidate for jobs, and started to intern at the company. The company, I think, was kind of lost at that period. So there was a management team in place that did not know a lot about the medical device industry. They had come from other industries, and they were really sort of desperate to learn, or in desperate need of learning about regulations. So I spent a lot of time in law school learning about healthcare regulations, privacy regulations, compliance, all that sort of thing. So I was quickly able to add value to the company by, sharing what I was learning in law school. From there, passed the bar, became general counsel, and worked my way up into eventually becoming the CEO in 2015. And that situation came about because the company was struggling, and we needed a fresh perspective. And I, along with an engineer who was essentially my business partner at the time, Paul Masnick, we we came up with this idea of using our sensor technology to make a fully implanted cochlear implant. And we're able to get some funding for that, and sort of the rest is history from there.
Wow, that's a very illustrious journey to where you are today, and that's really great how you started off as an intern and you were actually studying healthcare law in law school and everything. So I think it was meant to be. It's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, and one of my jokes though is one of the reasons I became the CEO is because nobody else wanted the job. I mean, the company was struggling. If somebody's looking to become an executive of a medical device company, maybe the easiest way to do it is to find a struggling company and help turn it around. So it's been a great opportunity. I'm very grateful that I have been able to contribute. Now I've been on the board as well since 2015, so I've really been able to really understand the inside of a business in a way that a lot of people don't get to, at my age. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and it's been an interesting ride.
Indeed. And so can you tell us a bit more about Envoy Medical, and maybe you can take us a bit back to where you started, how the company was specifically struggling, and where it is today, and what its core missions and values and goals are?
Absolutely. So the company is positioning itself as a hearing health company. And in that, what we really mean is we're not a hearing aid company. We're not a cochlear implant company. We really want to eventually offer a whole suite of products to allow people to improve their hearing healthcare across the spectrum. One of the things that we've learned we went public last year, and one of the things I've learned going around doing investor relations and talking to new people about the company is hearing loss isn't really well understood in the investor market, and probably in the general American public altogether. I think part of that is because you don't see a lot of hearing companies in this space. A lot of the hearing manufacturers are located in Europe. There's a couple in Asia, and then Australia. So it's relatively new to the investor public to have a hearing health company. So we've had to go around and really sort of explain ourselves and why we are different. And we believe we're different in a few fundamental ways. One is both of our current products use the ear to pick up sound. So we do not use a microphone. Both of us right now, we're talking into microphones. There's a lot of processing that's going to have to go for that signal. And it's still not going to be the same sound if you and I were sitting in the same room, having a cup of coffee together. Our voices would sound different. Well, if you use the ear to pick up sound, you really benefit from the natural anatomy. The outside of your ear, I always point to the big floppy thing on the side of our heads. We have these things called pinna, which help collect sound and focus it down to the ear canal, which then goes to the eardrum. All of that has a natural benefit. We evolved to hear that way, and our brains evolved to hear that signal. So we benefit from using that outer ear to pick up the sound. The way we do pick up the sound eventually is we use a piezoelectric sensor that sits on the incus, which is one of the hearing bones that's right behind your eardrum. We pick up the vibrations right off of that, process the signal, and then bring the signal down to the cochlea. Our first product, the Esteem, mechanically stimulates the cochlea. Our second product, the Acclaim, which is a cochlear implant, electrically stimulates the cochlea. So the real differentiators of Envoy Medical and why we are completely different from any other hearing company on the planet right now is that both of our products are fully implanted, and we do not use a microphone. We use the ear to pick up sound, and I think that sets us apart from everybody.
Indeed. And So for the Esteem device, I understand that that's fully FDA approved. And so could you tell us a bit more about the Esteem device and when it was approved and what its status is right now in the market? Is it available? And also more about how it's implanted. Is it surgically implanted, I'm assuming? And what is the process like for a patient if they go in to receive this device?
So in somebody's hearing loss journey, if you look at a hearing loss spectrum, on one side you're going to have almost perfect hearing, and on the other side you're going to have what we would call profoundly deaf. It's sort of like 20/20 hearing and blindness, right? As an analogy. So on the mild hearing loss side, where you're only maybe missing a couple of words in a sentence, or a couple of words in a conversation, you can do pretty well with a hearing aid. So a traditional hearing aid that we all have seen in the wild, now they have over-the-counter hearing aids, and Apple AirPods are now capable of being hearing aids. So those are well suited for the mild hearing loss. And these are people that do not have a tremendous amount of hearing loss yet, and really still have an active, viable cochlea that can take in more information. They do also pretty well in the moderate category, but then when you start to get to the severe hearing loss category, so these are people that are missing, half of a conversation. These folks need something different, and the reason they need something different is because the business end of your hearing is not your ear, it's not your ossicles, it's that cochlea that I referred to earlier, which has these hearing hair cells within them. Those hearing hair cells are essentially the endings to your hearing nerve, which takes the information to the brain. As you age, or if you take the wrong drug, or you get chemo, or you go to the wrong rock concert, whatever, some of those hearing hair cells can die off or be damaged, and so they don't function the way they normally would. So essentially, you can no longer make the noise loud enough so a hearing aid can't just be turned up all the way. It's really not going to do much for you at that point. You can't make the signal louder because what's receiving the signal has been damaged or died off. And that's when you need an implant. And so more people are familiar with cochlear implants, and we'll get to that, I'm sure. But we have an active middle ear implant, which is a step between hearing aids and cochlear implants. And that is the Esteem device that you alluded to. It's been FDA approved since 2010. It is for moderate to severe sensory neural hearing loss. So again, these are the people that are in between hearing aids and cochlear implants. And they're for people who have tried hearing aids, but just have not gotten enough benefit from them, whether it's they haven't got enough hearing benefit, or let's just be real, a lot of people don't like hearing aids. They're external devices. They can fall off. They can break easily. They're hard to maintain for some elderly folks. And there's this gap of people that need something different. And that's where our Esteem device really, really comes in. It is fully implanted. So I, bald guy like me, I don't have one, but if I had one, you might see a little bump where the battery pack is, but you wouldn't see anything on the outside of the head. No external devices at all. There's a remote control that turns it on, off, volume up, down, that sort of thing. It takes about 2.5 to 3 hours for a surgeon to implant it. The surgeon's a highly trained otologist or neuro-otologist, which are subsets of ENT. So these are, I like to call them the Top Gun surgeons of ENT ear surgery. And these folks, once they get implanted, they need a couple of weeks to heal, actually about 6 to 8 weeks for the fluid to leave the ear, to be reabsorbed, and then they're activated. And when they're activated, it's really like a whole new type of sound for them. These are folks that have been struggling with their hearing loss. They've been struggling with the hearing aids. And one of my favorite comments, anecdotal comments from some of these patients is they say, my shoulders have dropped. Because when you're hearing with a hearing aid and you're struggling to hear with a hearing aid, you kind of are always like tense. You're trying to hear through your hearing aid. And you can kind of see with people with glasses too, right? Where maybe it's not the right prescription. So they're sort of trying to look through the glass. But so their shoulders drop and they really enjoy that new sense of hearing. So that's our Esteem device. it struggled commercially because, which I alluded to earlier, because it's not covered by insurance. Medicare and Medicaid, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid have called it a hearing aid, and hearing aids are actually statutorily excluded from being coverable benefits. We're working very hard to have that mistake corrected. And frankly, previous management should have done that, but they did not. So that was one of the priorities that I had when I took over, is to start really trying to reverse that mistake to allow this device to be covered.
Yeah, indeed. You touched on such an important issue there in terms of coverage, because it sounds like, this device could be or is indeed life-changing could be life-changing for many patients. And then you have the access issue that comes in. So that's absolutely an important point. And I'm glad that you've taken over and are actively working towards that. And in terms of the second device that you have in the works, which is the Acclaim cochlear implant, what kind of people is that indicated for or designed for in comparison to the Esteem device?
So the Acclaim is a cochlear implant. So that will be what we believe will be a different, very unique type of a cochlear implant, in that it's A, fully implanted, and B, will use the ear to pick up sound, not a subdermal microphone or an external microphone. So it'll really be a different type of cochlear implant for folks. And it's currently investigational. We have 3 patients implanted at Mayo Clinic in Rochester. We're a Minnesota company, so it's great to work with Mayo Clinic here in Minnesota. And the patients have reported that they love their device. Their quality of life has increased. They report using it throughout the day. So we're very excited to now take that to another clinical trial, which we'll have to do, a pivotal clinical trial, where we will, it's a larger group of people. So now we'll have some efficacy endpoints that we pursue, some safety endpoints that we pursue. And so that hopefully will get started by the end of the year. But to answer your question, the Esteem is for that moderate to severe category, and these are folks that still have a little bit of residual hearing and can do relatively well with or without amplification from a traditional hearing aid. Cochlear implants are really for those folks who cannot get enough from a hearing aid. So a cochlear implant candidate is going to be somebody who, even with a hearing aid in, so imagine I had a hearing aid in, I would still be missing about 60% of this conversation, even with a hearing aid in. So the cochlea has been damaged to such a degree that I'm severe to profoundly deaf, and those folks really need a cochlear implant. Hearing aids don't do it enough for them. Even if you force them to wear a hearing aid, it's not going to do enough. So until there's a gene therapy or a drug fix or something, it's not my world, so I'm probably using the wrong terms, but until there's something that can actually regrow the hair cells that have been damaged, you need a cochlear implant once you cross that severe to profound threshold. And Envoy Medical is really excited because we believe now that we have the best mousetrap for that situation, in that it's fully implanted. It uses the ear. The battery lasts several days, not 1 or 2. It lasts 4 to 5. So we think we've really created a better solution. And there, earlier you asked sort of the mission or vision of the company. I blew right by it, but we're really trying to make hearing health solutions that fit the quality of life for a patient. So it's not about, we're not making devices for the hearing professional. I don't really care what an audiologist or a surgeon thinks about the performance of our device. I care more about what the patient thinks. I want the patient to really live a good life with our devices. And that's why when they're fully implanted, they can shower, they can sleep, they don't have to take it off at night. If you're a single parent, you can hear your child cry in the other room. You can hear somebody break into your hotel room. I mean, not to use some ridiculous examples, but those of us with hearing loss take for granted that, or without hearing loss, take for granted that if I have significant hearing loss and I'm in a strange location like a hotel, and I have to take my hearing aid out at night because you can't sleep with a hearing aid in. If I have to take my hearing aid or my cochlear implant, the external ones, I have to take them off. I can't hear anything. I can't hear an alarm. I can't hear anything.
Right.
So our devices are built to try to let people live a life without having to think about their hearing loss. And we don't want you to think about your hearing loss, and we don't
Right.
want you to think about our hearing device. We just want you to live your life.
Those are some excellent examples just to put things into perspective, indeed, because I think, like you said, people with normal hearing often do take for granted how important this sense is. I think vision comes first, but I think hearing oftentimes takes the backseat. But really, people with hearing loss, that quality of life, and to help restore that quality of life or attempt to do that, that's huge, I think, and so important. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, and it's very, very insightful. And so you did also mention the coverage situation, and so there is the Hearing Device Coverage Clarification Act. And so could you tell us a bit more about that and where it currently stands and what the current status is?
Yes, happy to. There are two hearing device coverage clarification acts right now. One is in the House, the House of Representatives, and one is in the Senate. One of the sort of frustrating processes about all this is I've had to relearn my, civics 101 and how a bill is made and how law becomes reality. So we needed a bill in both the House and the Senate, and then obviously at some point they need to come together, and each chamber needs to vote on their version of the bill, and then they need to come together and agree on one version before the president can sign it and it become law. But essentially, what this act does, it's a very simple act. If you go look up on the Congress.gov, you're going to see that it's about half a page long. It's not asking for a lot. All it's asking for is to say, look, active middle ear implants, especially those that are fully implanted, active middle ear implants, are not hearing aids. It's a ridiculous premise that something that is fully implanted, that takes 3 hours to implant by a highly trained physician, is the same thing as an external hearing aid that you can now buy at Best Buy for about $199. So the bill is asking or telling CMS that these class of devices are not to be hearing aids, that they should be hearing prosthetics or some other term, but not a hearing aid, so that they can be covered by Medicare. And Envoy is pushing this, but this would actually benefit our competitors as well. If they want to make a fully implanted active middle ear implant, this would benefit all of our competitors. In fact, our largest competitor, based in Australia, Cochlear Limited, they had a fully implanted active middle ear implant, but they actually gave up on it because there was no reimbursement, so I've been told. So the idea that you can actually create this new category of device would create competition, innovation, and would actually benefit hearing loss patients by bringing this option to be available. And some of your listeners might think, well, what about cochlear implants? Are they covered? Yes, they are covered, and so are bone anchored devices and something called brainstem auditory implants. And this is just another implant that should be covered. It's not saying hearing aids should be covered. That's a different argument for a different group of people. We're not a hearing aid company, so I'm not wading into that. I'm Switzerland in that discussion. But I very strongly believe that hearing implants should be covered, and we're gonna keep pushing this. We got to this point because CMS would not make the change on their own. They could have made an administrative change on their own. And I've had several conversations with them, but one of my last conversations with them, they essentially said, "Look, we're not going to change this." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm not going to give up. So I guess that means I need to get a law to tell you that you're going to change this." And the gentleman on the phone said, "Yes, you're going to have to get a bill passed." So challenge accepted, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Wow. And so are you one of the only companies driving this forward, or are there others in the space, collaborators, maybe academic institutions?
So we are the main company behind it. Like I mentioned, Cochlear Limited in Australia would also be benefit from this change and has expressed privately some support. Um, there is Medical Alley, which is we're again Minnesota company. So Medical Alley is a trade group here in town that helps medical device companies. They've been supportive of it and offered a letter of support. There's a couple of nonprofits that I haven't been given the privilege to start talking about publicly, but are behind the scenes pushing and offering support. One of them is very interested in um, devices for the disabled and really allowing people with a disability to get access to breakthrough technology. I mean, it's really tragic that in the richest country in the world, you have a breakthrough technology, but CMS isn't going to cover it because of other things. They'd rather cover things that are 30, 40 years old instead of something that's brand new, and that could really benefit folks. So that hopefully they'll let us start talking about their support publicly in the coming months. But right now, it's kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate where, something, again, that could be so game-changing, life-changing for patients, and you're running into things like insurance coverage or lack thereof in the access. So, but
And it's very short-sighted too.
yeah, yeah.
Hearing loss is tied to cognitive decline. It's
Aging, right? Chronic,
yeah.
yeah.
So you address it early, and you can save costs on the back end.
Absolutely. If you're doing a cost, benefit analysis, it factors in there as well. So yeah, I wish you the best of luck in getting this bill passed, and I'm sure that it's going to be a challenge, but I'm sure that you'll be victorious. Let's just say, because it's such an important cause. Yeah.
We have good bipartisan support on both sides. So it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's a bipartisan issue.
Yeah. That's wonderful to hear. And so just taking maybe a broader perspective in terms of the science of hearing health and what the landscape is currently like in terms of, the field has obviously evolved in the past couple of decades. And so this is kind of maybe a question for more general audiences, but what are some of the best ways to help protect or safeguard our hearing? And I think our industry professionals, our audiences here would also love to hear more about that as well.
Hearing is something that once you lose it, you lose it. So it is very much something you need to protect. You can't regrow your hair cells, like I mentioned earlier, until science changes that. And by the way, people have been trying to do that, and it hasn't gone well to this point. So the best course would be to protect your hearing. So, I love to be outdoors. I love to run my chainsaw, cut down trees to get out some aggression. You got to wear your hearing protection. You just have to. If you like to shoot guns, you got to wear your hearing protection. You like to go to live music, you got to wear, put some of those foam things in your ear, take the noise down 20 dB. You're going to benefit in the long run from that. Hearing loss is very much something that once you do it, it's not going to come back. And I unfortunately have a father-in-law who took a plane ride and all of a sudden lost his hearing in one side. You don't really know when it's going to creep up on you. So the best course of action for the majority of us is to protect your hearing with, those foam plugs or the big over-the-ear protectors. And then also for this generation, or for the younger generations who are really, and I guess I don't consider myself young anymore, but I'm an AirPod user, and you can damage your ear by putting things in your ear and turning the volume up too loudly, which is why, my Apple Watch and my phone start to say, you're in a loud environment, or you've been listening to music too loudly for too long. It's because there's a reality that you can damage your hearing just by listening to your AirPods or earbuds or whatever. So make smart choices, I guess, is the short answer.
Yeah, and there are ways to protect and safeguard your hearing, like you mentioned. Those alerts on your phone and devices, and the earplugs you mentioned as well. I mean, we have things for our eyes, sunglasses and all of that, but yeah, you never really pay attention to your ears and hearing. So that's very, very important. And thank you so much for those insights. In terms of the hearing health industry, and would you say it's more of a newer industry? Because you did talk about how the industry's mainly been focused on hearing aids, but what Envoy is bringing to the table is something different, where you're really focusing, I think, more so on really trying to tackle the root cause of hearing in a way by through these implants. And so how do you see the field having evolved thus far, and where do you think the field will be heading in the next couple of years, 5-10 years? What kinds of innovations can we see from Envoy, and just in general the trends in hearing science at the moment and in the coming years?
So I think you will see a continuous investment in people trying to find a drug or a therapy that can either stop hearing loss or regrow hair cells. I think that's going to be going on in the background for quite some time, and I wish them all the best of luck in doing that. It'd be pretty interesting if you could suddenly regrow your hair cells and get your hearing back. But I do think that's decades away from being perfected, where it could be actually released to a large group of folks. So I think the focus in the next several decades is going to be on making better hearing preservation, which we already talked about. So that's just making good choices so that you don't damage your hearing unnecessarily. But also on the device side. So on the hearing aid side, a big piece of news that came out, I guess it was last month, was Apple entering the market with the AirPods now being capable of being hearing aids just through a software update. I think you're going to find, if I were a betting person, I would bet that Samsung and Google and probably even Meta and others are going to start to come out with their own hearing solutions. So I think you're going to find more consumer electronic companies coming into the hearing aid space. And I think that's going to put a lot of pressure on the existing hearing aid business. So I'm actually quite excited that we're not a hearing aid company, because I do not want to compete with Apple. And then on the implant side, so where we are, you're going to see devices get smaller. You're going to see the device have a higher sort of certainty around how it's positioned so robotics are coming into the hearing aid space, or not the hearing aid, sorry, the cochlear implant space. There's a couple of companies that are working on robotics for cochlear implant insertion. So I do think you'll see a lot of technologies that have been in other areas of healthcare, like robotics. I think you're going to start to see that come into the hearing space and hopefully move this industry forward more quickly. And I'm very proud of our company and our team for being a catalyst in a lot of that. I mean, just the fact that people are talking about fully implanted hearing devices is because our team of engineers and everybody else pushed this idea forward. If we had just sort of sat on our hands and said, oh, well, it's too hard to enter that market, I think you wouldn't see innovation in this space, because the existing players were just fat and happy. I like to talk about it being a very complacent industry, and I think it is. So the new entrants are going to help push innovation, and I think you're going to see things get smaller, more compatible with your other electronics, and hopefully kind of more integrated into your daily life, which should increase adoption.
And for Envoy Medical, what are the short and long term goals for the company?
So we are very interested in building the business around the cochlear implant, because it's a known business, it's a known market, and we want our investors, people that are thinking about investing in us, COCH is our ticker, and I encourage people to follow us on there. So you're going to see us follow or announce news related to that cochlear implant, the trial getting approved, if and when it gets approved, and then potentially first patient enrollment, that sort of thing. So over the next year, you're going to sort of see us release news about that trial. On the Esteem side of things, we will continue to push on this legislation and push on CMS. Maybe we can get CMS to just change their position, and that would be great for everybody. So you might see us announce some things around that. We'll continue to push around that, and then just trying to raise awareness about hearing loss and make people aware that it affects a lot of people. I mean, everybody knows somebody with hearing loss. This is a massive market. It's a huge unmet need to bring in new technologies into this space. And I think Envoy Medical is well positioned to capture that opportunity. So I hope people do follow us and pay attention.
Indeed, we'll have all of Envoy Medical's information on our webpage accompanying this podcast with links to the company's website and more information. So please do check that out. Brent, thank you so much for your time today. I can't thank you enough for all of your insights and for really bringing to us a really important topic and important work that you're leading at Envoy.
Oh, absolutely. It was a pleasure to talk, and hope we get to do it again in the future when we have some more updates.
Absolutely. We'll definitely be in touch, and we'll be keeping an eye out on Envoy and all the fantastic work happening there. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
All right, that's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you liked today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.
To join the Xtalks community, visit Xtalks.com and register for exclusive access to curated content like live webinars, news articles, and educational videos. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers sharing them and should not be taken as professional advice, nor do they necessarily reflect the policy or position of Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com.